So I did my training with a property firm which grew really rapidly to 5 offices in the early 2000s, which is quite some time ago now. So as a trainee solicitor, it did seem like that at the time I was thrown in the deep end, but I really enjoyed the business aspect as I helped build up one of the offices and set it up in Bromley, which is in Kent. So we worked really closely with the in-house broker firms. So I was dealing with mortgage brokers on a day-to-day basis where they would be arranging mortgages for clients, and we would be doing the conveyancing, remortgages, and all the legal property side of that part of the transaction. So a part of my training, I also did it with a top 20 London law firm called Beechcroft Wandsborough. They're now called DAC Beechcroft. And after qualifying, I was working for a boutique property law firm based in London. So that was a great opportunity because I worked really predominantly with high net worth clients, expats, and a lot of overseas investors, a lot from Singapore and Hong Kong, that in the early 2000s, they were just pouring their money within London mainly. So many of you know, well, Baker Street in London is a great spot for shopping and lunches. So, but it wasn't so good for me because I had young children, and hence in 2012, just mid 2012, I decided to take a career break. And during the career break, I did lots of other things and looking after my portfolio at the time. Then in 2019, I officially set up my property investment company. So as I was quite keen on auctions, I like auctions, I like the certainty of it, I like the speed of it. I was able to get my knowledge and my background to read a lot of legal packs quite efficiently and quickly to going through the auction houses. So I received quite good feedback from fellow investors and developers on giving them a few tips here and there on their potential lots. And so this beginning of this year, I decided to renew my practicing certificate at the Law Society. So currently I'm a consultant property solicitor for a property firm based in Watford called Linwood Solicitors. So alongside that, I'm an investor developer myself as well. Some of you also now might be wondering, how do I actually do both roles? But actually they're quite complementary in the way that I help clients to look through a legal pack, but with an investor hat on as well. So I can also see what their perspective is because I've been there myself and I've been through the process. So Moves was Lockdown 1.0 project, I will call it. So it was an auction purchase. Those are the brief figures around it. The background story is I went to the auction in December 2019. So it's almost a year ago now. It feels so long ago. But this property, when I went to the auction, it went above my ceiling cap rate, and someone else eventually bought it at the auction. Over a month later, in the new year, the auction house called and said, the purchasers are messing us around, Bushra, and if you're still interested, you are the second person bidding, let us know. So even though it went above my budget and the cap that I wanted to bid up to, I still viewed it once more time, did my numbers again, and went and said, okay, I'll go ahead. So I did save some money by doing actually some parts myself and roped my husband in as well, because he actually quite likes that kind of work in carpentry, and made some use of him as well on the weekends. So the most annoying part I have to say on this project was paying the extra 2 months of bridging finance, which was unavoidable because the builders down tooled for nearly 4 weeks. Then it was another hurdle getting the kitchen ordered and delivered. Well, actually, it wasn't even delivered. We had to pick it up because they weren't doing deliveries. And then obviously the whole plaster palaver, I'm sure the whole world knows about that. I mean, bridging finance is brilliant, but obviously in that scenario, you've got to really 100% keep your communications open with your bridging lender, make sure they're really up to date with what's going on, because obviously they're probably getting a bit anxious what's going on and how you're coping, and make sure you tell them what you're doing as well to speed things up as well in your circumstances. So overall, it was a good project, and I'll show you some pictures. So that's the kitchen, obviously. So I'm really pleased with the way the kitchen came out. I completely changed the layout of the ground floor. I took out an old serving hatch, if any of you are old enough to remember what a serving hatch even is. And I installed a downstairs cloakroom, which otherwise would have been dead space. So got a bit creative, went a bit bold on the navy units, and it really stood out. When it came to tenants viewing the property, they immediately loved it because they could tell it was a family home as well. The way that it was decorated as well and made it into that kind of sort of that appeal as well. So it's above your standard buy-to-let basically refurb, and it's obviously come into the portfolio in that sense. That's a picture of the front reception. So this property is actually quite unique in that it's got 2 bedrooms and 2 receptions. Not many Victorian properties have that 2 reception room and kitchen as well at the same time. So it's quite a big property in that sense. And when you look at it from the front, you don't imagine that it's actually really big on the inside. It's got really high ceilings, and the rooms are really good sizes. So this particular front reception room is beautifully done with the laminate flooring, and in total we took out 4 fireplaces. So just imagine, and the chimney stack. The chimney came out all the way down. It went the chimney came into 4 front fireplaces, 2 bedrooms, and then 2 ground reception rooms. And there was so much dust, it filled out basically 2 of the biggest skips you can get. The other amazing feature I liked was the external insulation I did for the first time. So because it was quite an old property, we decided that we'd do this and get some sort of external insulation whereby it actually retains the brick wall in good stead, in future-proofs it, as well as makes it gives it that much better curb appeal. The front wall, the previous owners had put awful white paint. The side of it was this ugly kind of bitumen kind of material. It was disgusting. And I just thought, I can't give this to anybody. It's just awful. So we completely did the external installation, rendered it, and it just looked amazing. And the neighbors actually thanked me because obviously it was an eyesore before, but now it looked really nice. So the crux of today's topic is the legal pack. These are just the main documents that you can expect when you see the legal pack. So I don't know if anybody's bought from auction, but when you go to an auction house website, for example, if you click on lot 1, you'll see a little tab that says legal pack. Click on the legal pack, and you'll see maybe 2 documents or 10 or 50 even documents. And out of those documents, those are the kind of things that you can expect. So the first crucial document is the office copies and the plan, of course, and that's from the land registry website. And unless it's registered, you will always get the office copy. And this obviously states the main clauses that you need to be aware of, the main things that will affect the property, and also restrictive covenants or any other documents that might refer to another document that also might be listed in them. The TR1 is the legal transfer document, which your solicitor will ensure it's signed to send to the land registry after completion. So often in the legal pack, the other side, the vendors, will have already drafted this and put it in the legal pack, depending on obviously what their situation is and how pressed for time they are. Now, the other thing is leases. They'll either be residential property or a commercial. So this will determine whether there is already a tenant in there also. So you just need to be aware of whether you're buying a leasehold property and there's a commercial tenant or a residential tenant. Obviously, that there's other things that you need to be aware of when there's also a sitting tenant. So what I thought would be quite good is to have a practical example of what kind of things you could expect in a legal pack. So here's a case study. Now this one, a client of mine, she was looking to bid an auction, but the property was unregistered. So what this means is there was no actually electronic deed at the land registry. So you won't get the office copy. Instead, you'll see really archaic documents, and they might be decades or a century old, and you'll see usually gorgeous calligraphy, and it could be dating back a century ago. And you've got to interpret that. You've got to interpret the not only the calligraphy, but you've got to understand that kind of language they might be using a century ago as well. So there was also a power of attorney included in this pack. So in this scenario, in a practical point of view, I just wanted everyone to think, what would you do in that scenario? Would you A, tell the auction house to stop giving you nonsensical legal packs in the first place? B, prove 15 years going back of clear title, which is known as epitome of title? Or C, check the terms and the date of the power of attorney? I'd give everyone a few seconds, put it in the chat, or maybe jot it down on a piece of paper, just have a think or a pause. What would you do in that scenario? It might be your dream project next month coming up. What would you do in that scenario? I mean, I would obviously highly recommend you speak to a solicitor, but just to get you engaged and understanding what kind of practical points you might need to think about. Okay, so I'll end your suspense here. The answer is B and C, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no broken chain of ownership, and you've got to go back 15 years. So when you're looking at that legal pack, make sure you've got all the documents in consecutively in time order going back 15 years, because that is going to be crucial to send for your solicitor to send to the land registry and do the first registration. If that can't be completed, it's going to be near to impossible getting your first registration at land registry. C also, because power of attorney is quite a crucial document, because it means where it's simply a deed where one person gives another person that authority to act on their behalf. And there's mainly 2-3 types of power of attorney, but the most used often is the ordinary, also general power of attorney, it's usually known as. So the power of attorney will continue until it's usually revoked by the donor or terminated by law. So in the case of a trustee power, which is granted under Section 25, under the TA 25 Act, it's usually 12 months. That's how long it's got to be, the time it will last. So you just want to make sure you check the details, check the terms, and that person who's given the power of attorney is within that time range, and the terms of it allow that person to actually sell that property. So there's also a risk of having a very old power of attorney, as there might be a risk that there's no guarantee the vendor has that authority to sell it. Moving on, what we'll do is another case study where this client was looking to bid for a commercial piece of land at auction, and it was all very well until there were extra documents loaded up, and literally I emailed to the client the title review, and I got an email alert saying that there were extra documents uploaded on the auction house website, and this showed new special conditions and a completely different plan to that was originally posted in that website. So in this scenario, would you tell the auction house to stop bothering you with new documents? B, would you compare the new plan to the previous plan in the pack? Or C, read the additional special conditions and check for extra costs? Either put them in the chat or scribble it down on a paper, and then we'll compare our answers. So the answer is B and C. I hope you all got that right. So what it was is he was trying to buy a piece of land, just imagine a rectangle shape, and the office copy said the outlined plan in red. The special condition and the extra plan actually said, well, that was the original office copy plan, but what you're going to buy in this auction lot is actually the outline green on the plan. So it's literally half of the original plot. And then on top of that, the special conditions were really onerous and made him spend quite, basically wanted the buyer to spend thousands and more, and also gave him, made the buyer unaware, made the buyer actually in a position where they didn't have a right to actually buy that property, definitely, and where the vendor actually could just pull out the property, pull out the transaction at any time. So it was a very onerous situation where even if he did exchange, he definitely wasn't guaranteed completion with that vendor. Lastly, here's a legal pack that was done recently as well, and I think it was for one of the clients in this group. The clients, they were looking to bid for a residential property. In the scenario, there were 2 charges on the property, and they just found out that the registered owners were deceased. So in this scenario, what would you do? Would you A, find out when the funeral is and pay your respects? Check the legal pack for probate documents? Or C, ask the auction house or vendor solicitors for more information? So have another think, ponder about that, and I'll give it another second. So in this scenario, you would want to make sure that you check the legal pack for probate documents. Now, there was no probate documents in the legal pack, so I wasn't aware that the owners had passed away. Unfortunately, the client found out from the auction house that was a scenario, and in that instance, they were trying to find out from the auction house to get some more information. They weren't being very cooperative, and the vendor solicitors weren't giving that much information either. And the fact there are 2 charges on the property, it sounded very dubious because there wasn't very much assurance for you as the buyer to buy a property that had not only 1 but 2 charges, and you didn't know who was actually taking over the property in that situation, who were the executors who were going to actually sign the documents to actually sell the property to completion. So in that scenario, it looked like there was a back-to-back sale, and it was a bit too high risk, I think, for that client to go ahead. So I hope that's kind of given you a little bit of flavor of what the practical points might be if you were to go to an auction. Obviously, there's hundreds of other scenarios, but those are just some few simple and easy to understand recent ones that I picked out. So what I tell my clients or other fellow investors, developers, is what I highly advise is you need to get in a detective mode. So if you grew up in the 80s like I did, just imagine Columbo or Murder, She Wrote, and you need to get into that kind of detective mindset. So you've got to find the missing puzzle to that auction pack, because everything is not going to be in the auction pack. There will be things missing, and depending on your scenario, what your position is and what you want to do with that property, you need to make sure everything is there in that pack. And if it can't see it in the pack, ask the solicitors if they're willing to tell you, or ask the auction house as well. It's not that simple to sometimes get that extra information, but it's worth trying to just probe them as much as possible. So this is a really important term, caveat emptor, and a lot of you will know it means let the buyer beware. So it gives that onus on the buyer to find out everything he or she obviously needs to know or wants to know. So it's a Latin term, but it applies every day to day. So it's the buyer's responsibility to find out everything they need to know for that property. So, but you might be thinking, well, isn't it up to the sellers to disclose the defects? But the sellers duty is the seller's duty to disclose any defects with the property only goes so far as to best of their knowledge. So surprisingly, the seller actually has no obligation to reveal any defects, although they must answer all the queries about the condition of the property honestly to avoid being sued for misrepresentation. So under the principle of caveat emptor, the buyer of a property, you can't recover damages from the seller just simply because they failed to disclose defects to the buyer. So you might be thinking, well, what's this picture of a little doll got to do with the auctions? Now, the story is that one of my friends, she told me of her cousin buying a beautiful dining table from eBay and thinking she's got an amazing bargain. Days later, when she expected the delivery of this dining table, it came through the letterbox. So the letterbox, obviously, the normal size dining table would not fit, and it was a doll's house table. So had she done a little bit more due diligence, she would have found out the measurements of that dining table. So don't be in that same situation when you go to a property auction. So one of the things I would highly advise is everyone to be auction ready. Now, I do recommend a very good book by my friends Jay Howard and Piotr Reznik. It's called Before the Hammer Falls. It's a purple book. Easily, you can get it on Amazon, I think. But if you need to get it, just contact me and I'll find out as well. But make sure you've got your name that you're purchasing the property in. So are you buying in your company name or your individual name? Because then you need to make sure whether you need to set that company account and company at company's house. Make sure you send all your documents, your ID, etc., to the auction house, and obviously the deposit and fees to the auction house within that deadline. Now, with everything being online now, all the auction houses are online. It's a bit simpler to send deposit and fees. You've got to just put in your credit card details, and then they'll give you the okay to be able to say, okay, well, we've got authorization to take deposit of this, fees of this as well. So obviously, lastly, make sure you know your solicitor's details, and then you're in a much better position to be able to bid on the day. So what I thought I'd do is a kind of easy step-by-step process where you can just understand what you need to do to be able to be auction ready. So the first step we just discussed is read that legal pack and the standard conditions. Make sure you do your due diligence and understanding not only the legal pack, but obviously on the property as well. Step 2 is make sure you understand what the documents mean, especially if you're not going to get a solicitor to read it. Make sure you get somebody else as well, a friend, another investor, colleague, to read it as well. It's really important to get another set of eyes to understand what every terminology means in it, every clause means, so you're aware what the documents might have an impact on you, and if there should be anything missing, you might be alerted to that. Step 3 is have all the relevant searches been provided. So in the normal, say, resi properties, the main 3 things are the enviro, the water and drainage, and local authority. But quite often, time and time again, I'm noticing at least one search missing, but they'll throw in the chancel check search, which is usually quite easy to find out the details. And obviously the EPC, you can easily go to the EPC website. Now, with the searches, they're really critical in finding out what your impact might be on that property. And one of my friends, she viewed a property, read the legal pack, bought the house. Days later, her solicitor told, do you know that there is no water mains connected to the property? She went to the house. She viewed the house, I think, twice. There was actually a physical bath leaning against the wall, but she never turned on any of the taps or flushed the toilet, but there was no water connected. So I asked her, I said, did you check what the water search said? And she said there was no water search in the pack even. So clearly there was some scenario where maybe they thought they were going to do it up and connect it themselves, but they never got round to it. But it's really important in that sense, if you're going to view the property, at least put the water on, make sure you've got the water search, because that's a big hassle. Obviously, you've got to then put in another contingency of maybe a few thousands of pounds or more to have the water connected. So following on, the next step is make sure your property is going to be insured from the date of the auction. So make sure you speak to your insurance broker and you've got that in place, prepared, because you need to know that's another cost as well that you will have to encounter if you were to be successful. Often you will be responsible for the insurance of that property from the date of auction, which will be the exchange date, not from the completion date, which is usually the norm as well. The next step is make sure you've got your mortgage offer or your finances in place. So that might be your bridging finance, your investors' money. Make sure you've all got that all in place and everything's ready to go. And obviously the next step is register for the auction, and you've got all the things that you need to send to them in plenty of time, and they've actually acknowledged that you are registered and ready, you are able to bid on the day. The last step is more to do with if it's a commercial property, so you need to check if it's a transfer of a going concern, and that's to do with the VAT position. So obviously make sure you tell your solicitor in plenty of time before the auction date. Give it at least minimum 1 week, because really your solicitor needs to make sure they've got capacity to take it on, as well as they might give you some tips on what you need to be doing as well. So you keep on track of your progress, because the time goes really quickly, not only from when the lot comes up on auction, but also from the day of the auction, from the day that you see the auction a lot on your website till the actual auction day. That's only 2 weeks usually, and you've got to view it, you've got to sort your finances out, and maybe get a survey done, get builders quotes, and all of those you might want to get some feedback on, and do your own due diligence and calculations of your property as well. So this is a very important document. It's called the Standard Conditions. It's either a 1-page or 3-page document in the legal pack, and this really will make or break your deal. There's so many conditions, but these are the most common, and it's basically where the seller changes the general conditions of sale and adds in new terms, usually in their favor. So the first one is buyer is to pay the seller's search costs. That's quite normal. Now, the search costs will be to cover their expenses of the searches, the environmental, the water drainage, the other searches that they may have also got in that situation. So that might be a few hundred to 1,000, if not more, depending if it's a commercial property. The second one is buyer to pay the seller's legal fees. Now, be really careful when you read these search costs and legal fees expenses, because they are often, sorry, ignore that, it's the clock chime. So be careful when you read this. It's the premiums and fees are often put in words, so you might be skim reading it and looking for a figure, but it's actually put in words. So it might be £4,700 legal fees. Just expect that in words. And that can be quite expensive as well, because it might be £4,700, or it might also be 4% of the premium of the sale price, whichever is higher is usually what it's quoted as. The third one is that the seller can decide not to complete and won't be liable for any costs or compensation. Now, this was exactly the scenario on one of the examples I gave for the land auction lot, where the seller, if they decide not to complete after the exchange date, the day of the auction, and you might have spent X amount of money already, and at the last minute, the seller can just pull out and for whatever reason and say, well, we're not willing to complete, and you're just left with the expense of paying the solicitor and any other costs that you might have incurred to get to that stage. Fourthly, be completion date ready. Make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. Make sure, like I said, going through all the points, is you've got all your documents in place, you've signed, documented everything, you've got your finance in place, because then obviously the fifth point is notice to complete. So if you don't complete on the completion date, it triggers an event where the other side can send you a notice to complete. This basically makes time of essence. And what that means is you've got 10 days to complete. And that notice to complete also means you've got to pay an extra amount to the other side. And then you also then incur daily interest costs. And that's something that will be in the contract at the same time. So the common pitfalls, unfortunately, I see is clients failing to research not early enough and leaving it a bit too last minute. And then I say, it's really last minute. I don't think you're going to be in time to be able to keep on top of this if the auction is tomorrow. So make sure you do your due diligence in plenty of time up till the auction date. And then just, you've got to keep momentum going up to completion, because the time goes very quickly with the amount of work you've got to condense in literally maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks at the max as well. So make sure you keep on top of it. Obviously, you could risk losing your deposit if you don't complete on time, and much more. Make sure you include the cost of the seller's fees in your calculations when you're doing your analysis of that deal. And also, do check the addendum, because often a day before or on the day of the auction house updates certain lots, and they might say there's another clause in this, or this has been changed. So do keep tabs on that as well. So just finalizing, I hope that's been really helpful to everybody. Here are my social media contacts, and if you want to get in touch with me, please make a note. Insta and LinkedIn are usually the best ways of communicating with me. That's my firm email address if you want to contact me for any property related work. But otherwise, I hope that's been of value to everybody. And thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Bushra.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. We've got so many questions already, which we'll start going through right now. We're going to start with the latest from Kate Day. What are your red flags, things in legal packs that would make you run a mile?
Good question. There's so many things that can vary from document to document, and it might be. So recently, only the most recent one I did was earlier this week, where a client, there was a restricted covenant, and that restricted covenant was quite recent. So that I told him, if he was going to buy, make sure you don't tell anybody you're going to convert it into a HMO, and there's specific policies you can take out just to protect you in that situation. But there was another client there was a restrictive covenant, and that was 100 years old. So in that scenario, it's very unlikely that that company is A, still around, and B, is going to enforce it. But in that same scenario, just as the one that's recent, you need to take a bespoke policy out, which your solicitor can advise you is a future what's it called? Future kind of policy, where if you're going to breach in the future, you take this bespoke policy, you tell your lender, you tell the insurer, and they will give you that kind of cover. But obviously, there is no protection completely, that nobody's going to try to kind of pursue in that scenario. But the other flags are quite a few that I've mentioned, is certain documents not being there, because there's often there'll be the red flags are if you don't see a document, and then you need to be a bit more wary if they haven't put in a contract in the legal pack. Then you're just a bit wary again, who are the sellers. And what I find most often is there's a lot of back-to-back sales at the moment going on, so I'm a bit wary when they don't put in the transfer document, they don't put in the contract, and they're still not very cooperative at the same time, just to give you more information. So in that side, it's a risk game where you're just trying to think, well, are you willing to take the risk on not knowing who the seller is? That's fine, but as long as you're covered in the special conditions and nobody can pull out, and you've still got enough of the documents to continue with the completion, and you're sure that you're going to be able to do your registration as well. Charges, just be really wary of charges, and knowing that that can actually be removed as well. So obviously the vendor solicitor is under an undertaking to remove those charges. There's so many things that obviously you can't cram in, like it's like a 2-year postgrad course I could cram in, but rather than bore you with property law, there's lots of little things. But if you gave me a scenario where maybe, for example, if there's a sitting tenant, that's another big alert, because there's so many other extra kind of checklists your solicitor will have to do and be alerted. If it's a commercial tenant, they've got extra rights as well. If it's a resi tenant, they've got extra rights, and kind of what kind of tenancy it is. There's so many little kind of tick box you need to do just to check what your position would be, because a lot of tenancies you might not be able to even get rid of that tenant as well. And obviously you need to be able to understand what your position is and what your plans are for that property, what your scenario would be in that scenario, in that situation.
Fantastic.
So I hope that answered actually. I went a bit off.
Well, no, you gave quite a few red flags actually, which was fantastic. And obviously, as you were mentioning, you can go on for a couple of days with all these red flags and everything like that. And we've got lots more questions, Bushra. First of all, we've got also lots of thanks as well. So thank you very much from us. We've got one from Louise here. What are the auction codes of conduct relating to disclosing information at the last minute or changing information already provided? And this is Louise was thinking of your case study number 2 there.
Yeah, so far as I'm aware, the code is basically they can upload as much as they want right up until the day of the auction. So you've got to be so alert to right up until the day of the auction. Hence I said, check the addendum, check, there might be actually updates or changes. And even on the day of the auction, you'll realize the auctioneer will say there's an addendum notes, and I'm still getting an addendum, little things that I need to add on to, lot this, lot X, lot number 1, to be able to say, okay, actually this is going to be added in here. So there's never ending amount that they can actually add to it, and right up until the actual day they will. Obviously if something happens and you've bought the property and then you find out, then obviously that's something that you've got to then pursue the auction house for misrep or any other cause that might be necessary.
So could I go to, if I keep on with this, Bushra, one of my mentors was Susanna Cole, and she, and I think that we've got a couple of people who've been a mentee of Susanna's online actually. And what Susanna was saying was always when you go into auction, always have a solicitor who you can ring up at 10 o'clock at night. And because she says, because that's where the changes come or things like that. Is that true? Is that true?
100%. So I think it was Monday night. I sent a email to the client, told him everything, and about 9 p.m. I discussed the legal title with him. I said, and then what is every client wants to know, what's the risk? What is it you need to know? And then within just 15-20 minutes, I said, you're okay on this, you're okay on that. That I'd be a bit wary about, but you're covered on that if you get the indemnity policy when you buy it. Now, obviously the only bad thing in a way is when you buy from auction, you've got to pay for the indemnity policies. Usually when you buy from your estate agent, usually it's the seller's obligation to pay for those indemnity policy. But it's just one extra thing you've got to be wary about, that you're going to have to pay for those indemnity.
Fantastic. So you're basically, well, you've already given an example of being phoned at 9 o'clock at night. Before I move on to Niall's question, what's the latest you have actually been phoned up at night or early in the morning with a question about there's been some changes?
Don't answer it, Bushra. Don't answer it.
I think that was probably Monday. No, actually, no, changes. No, I think that the most annoying one was probably the land example I gave you. Literally, I emailed the developer. I said, yeah, it's all good. You can buy it, go for it. Even I'll chip in for it. And then literally 2 seconds later, again, alert, all these changes. I was like, oh, bugger. And then literally, having spent X amount of time on preparing that legal title, I then had to spend an extra amount of time going through the extra special conditions and this whole palaver that was like, actually, you know what? I don't think you should go for it now.
Right.
Because it's not even a deal.
Yeah, so you have to be on your toes, and that's one of your key messages of your talk as well. So I've got a question from Niall. He asked this in 7:55. I will get to everyone's questions as soon as I can. Would you also recommend you do a survey before bidding?
So that's a really personal preference, really. I think depending on obviously the property, I would highly recommend you do as many viewings as you can. Obviously, with COVID and everything going on, just the auction house always gives you the viewing times. Try and go to as many as possible. If you can do one on your own and one obviously with a builder or your contractors. If it's the commercial property, yes, I think you should. Obviously, it depends on your experience at the end of the day. If you've done so many of the same property that you're looking to buy, you might not think it's necessary, but obviously have a second pair of eyes. If you need to, get somebody to kind of tell you what kind of condition the property is, it might just be okay to do it with your contractors. But if you're unsure and it's a large property and it's something that you haven't done, then it might be even worth paying up to that £1,000 for that commercial property that you want to look into as well in more depth. Rather than you lose 10s, 20, 50k, £1,000 might not at the time be that bad, really, and you'll know a little bit more how to analyze that deal as well.
Okay, so it's about risk assessment.
Of course.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we've got a question from Louise. How does the quantity and quality of information obtained at auction compare with what you get with an estate agent?
That's an interesting question. The quality, it can vary. You probably get more information, I think, from the estate agent. Now, it can vary. Some auction houses, and I think it varies on lots, actually. I think on lots, depending on the legal pack, depending on the vendor's position, their solicitor, they might be more forthcoming. So they might give you more information. For example, I didn't know one of the case studies where the owners, or at least the registered owners, had passed away. So at least they gave that much information. So it can vary from lot to lot, I would say. And it's down to you, like I said, it's down to you to find that information out. Whereas in the estate agent scenario, I think the estate agent might tell you a bit more without you asking or pushing for that information as well.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got loads more questions here, Bushra. Here's one from Jane Skinner. In what scenario can one exchange but not have the power to then complete?
So that's good. So that would probably be if you exchanged and you can't complete. That might be because if the vendors pulled out, I would imagine. So if the vendors are saying for some reason or another that they're not able to and they're willing to pull out, and if you can't complete, it might be because of your finances. Must be something wrong going on, something that's kind of come into the works that you're not able to do that completion. So there must be something more to that story in that scenario.
Okay, all right. So again, it's about the story. It's about the actual specifics. Okay, we've got one from Yogesh here. Can you indemnify against building regulation, planning, and other standard searches?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. That's a big yeah. That's a quick yes. One from Kieran Gill. I hope I've said that right. I do apologise if I've got it wrong. In this scenario where the registered owner was deceased, how would you find out who the executors are?
The executors.
Yeah, executors. Yeah, not executors. That was a bit. No, yeah,
that's okay. I think there is a portal that I feel that there might be a way of finding that out. I don't personally deal with that kind of research, but if I had to, I think there is something that you can go to. It doesn't come to my head, but there is a place where if a solicitor's acting for somebody who's passed away, they have to legally post it that so and so has passed away. If you know of anybody who wants to get in touch or know of a will, they got some sort of way of, on the Law Society, there's a magazine called the Gazette, and they have to legally put that in there. So there is a way of finding out. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how you'd find that out as well.
Well, you may be able
that's something that I'd have to look into, actually.
Fantastic. Well, if you remember, you put it into the WhatsApp, the WhatsApp that we've got in here.
Sure.
And if anyone who hasn't got onto that WhatsApp, Adam will talk about that later on, hopefully. We've got Justin. Justin said this might be a silly question. There's no such thing as silly questions, Justin. But do most properties sell below market value through auctions?
Not right now. Oh my God, not right now. They are going bonkers for some reason or another. Please don't anybody pay more for than it's worth. Honestly, it's ridiculous. I think 2 weeks ago, I watched 5 hours of an auction with Jay and Piotr, the guys that I mentioned who wrote the book. And we went through lot by lot of this auction, and people were paying silly money. And
a guy's done that for me, actually. He bought a plot of land of mine from West London, paid 92.5 grand, tried to do a back-to-back on it. So he exchanged with me, tried to then throw it into auction. He's now thrown it into auction 6 times. He still can't sell it.
We've mentioned the phrase back-to-back, and for those who don't know what back-to-back is, Bushra, do you want to just confirm what we mean by back-to-back? And then the second part of that question is why, because you mentioned there's quite a lot of back-to-backs going on at the moment. Why do you think that is so?
So I think people are maybe they're just thinking they can actually make quick money, really. Literally, they've bought a property from one auction, maybe putting it in another auction, or they've bought a property some other method and they just put it on the auction again, and they think they can make that extra whatever it is in profit. And literally there's been no registration at land registry, so you can't tell who's the actual current owner legally either. So that is quite frustrating as an investor developer myself, as the solicitor as well, where you can't actually find out what the current scenario is and what it might be actually worth, because then you don't know how much they've paid for it, because it's just artificially inflating the price, really, as far as I'm concerned. Because in an example where the guide price a couple of weeks ago was 700k for a house in London. I mean, it's London, fair enough. But it went for 1.2 million. And Piotr's comment was, people are literally flushing money down the toilet. That's the best way he was describing it, because I think you've got to be really careful. You've got to really keep in mind that what is that current market value of that property right now? Then on top of it, what are your costs going to be to refurb it and any other additional costs that you might incur along the way? And then that's your GDV at the end. But then if you're paying another 10, 20, 50k more, why are you doing that?
Too many homes under the hammer lot. That's what it is. I think a refurb costs 50p. That's the problem. That's the problem. I had it with mine where on the exchange. So the guy bought the site from me, and I said to him, "Oh, are you going to buy and build next to?" Because I retained the property and sold a section of land off. And I said, "Oh, are you going to build out?" And he went, "Oh, yeah." I looked into him and I was like, "Yeah, you've got a very kind of no information on your website kind of guy, but you've been around a long time with loads of SPVs that you've shut down." So I said to me, "I think you're going to do a back-to-back." And I said to him, "Are you going to do a back-to-back? I really don't care if you are." And he went, No, I'm going to build it. Anyway, he exchanged and he threw it into the auction. And of course, he tried to sell it 28 days later. So he did an 8-week, he wanted to do delay completion with me, exchange with delay completion of 8 weeks. I said, "That's fine by me. I don't care. It's a garden. I don't need it." And he threw it into auction and tried to sell it 4 weeks later. And I sold it for 92.5 grand. Plus he had to do 7.5 grand's worth of remedial works. And he didn't get any offers over 82 grand. And also what I had in my document was that at the bottom of the garden, it was partially owned by, well, I say partially, the entire garden was owned by the Highways Department. So way back when, that restriction hadn't been removed, and I spoke to the council, I spoke to the planning guys, and they said you might be best you get that removed. It would cost you 5 or 6 grand to get it removed, and I left it. And when he bought it from me, all I said to him was, have you checked the planning permission? Have you checked the pack thoroughly? He said, yeah. I went, fine, great. I didn't raise that to him. So now he's trying to sell it. And of course he's bought it for 92.5. He's got to spend 7.5 grand putting remedial works to my house. And he's got to remove the restriction from the highways people at the bottom of the garden. And if he wasn't experienced, I would have raised it with him. But because he was experienced, I said, I hope you read the pack properly. And he went, yeah, I have.
Yeah, well,
that's caveat
emptor, isn't it? It's his duty to do that due diligence in that sense.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Adam, you've put in the information about joining the WhatsApp group.
Yes, I have.
There, haven't you? I'm just trying to find what time it was, but it's around 8:05, 8:06, isn't it?
Yeah, what I will do as well is, Bushra, do you mind if we upload this video to our online educational resource platform?
No, that's fine. Perfect.
Fine. I'm going to put a link in if anybody wants to catch up with this. Go and click that link, join up. It's £4.95 a month. It just pays for the web hosting costs, basically. But if you've learnt loads of information so far, and I'm sure there's more to come, is it worth £5? Of course it is. So go download the video and cancel the subscription afterwards. That's absolutely fine. Do what you like. But you'll find all of the people that who've spoken on the Reading Property Meet and the Property Deal Clinics on that link. Go find out more. So, but have we got any more questions, Ben?
We've got loads more.
Yeah, okay. Keep cracking on then, if you're okay, Bushra.
Thanks, Bushra. So we've got one from Yogesh here. So to get more information, do we ask the sellers, solicitors, vendor, or auction house?
Everyone, anyone.
Yeah.
You're going to have to really ask whoever you think will give you the answer in that scenario, because you've got that limited amount of time. It's your duty, your best interest to find that information out. So why wouldn't you just test everybody out?
Yep, fantastic. So you just basically, because it's, it's, as you mentioned before, it's your responsibility. You've got to do your due diligence, so you find out who from anywhere, really. Okay, so we've got another one from Yogesh before we move on to James. Just thinking about fraud, says Yogesh, is it the seller's solicitors to make sure the owner really is the owner or yours?
Well, your seller's going to do obviously their best ability, and they will do their due diligence, and they will find out who, when it comes to the exchange point. After that, your solicitor will usually get all the documents from the other side. So usually if the owner is not the person who was actually registered, you'll eventually find out who the owner is, because obviously when it comes to after exchange, your solicitor will get all the documents because somebody's got to sign the contract. So you will find out who the owner is eventually, but beforehand, you might not necessarily know, but your solicitor will try their best to do, any title review and find out and give you that best advice, but you might not know until after the auction.
Okay, thank you, Bushra. We've got one more question from Jane. How can you make sure the auction lot seller will complete?
You can't really make sure, really, but unless, just check the special conditions. As long as that clause isn't in that special conditions where they can just pull out before completion, then you can pretty much be certain that they're quite agreeable and they are going to be willing and ready to complete. So it's in your best interest. But if that clause is in the special conditions, then your risk is obviously increased.
Thank you, Bushra. I think that's the end of our questions that we've actually got. So from all of us, thank you very much, because we really, really appreciate all your expertise and your time this evening. So thank you. Really, thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bushra.
We've got a link in. Yeah, sorry, Adam.
Okay, Ben, I think you're lagging a bit, by the way. So
am I? Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay.
it's all right.
I'll leave it to you, mate.
Okay. Yeah, just to say, Bushra, thank you so much. I know that you've acted for a couple of mentees who were on our program as well. You're really, really quick, very, very proficient. As you can see, the thing about auctions are that it's extremely complex, and you've got to have the right team around you. And Bushra is, I'd probably say, the most important person when it comes to the auction side of things. Go and pay what you need to pay to that lady to be able to see and spot all those problems. Do not try and do auctions on the cheap. If you can't afford the theme, the ticket to the theme park, do not play in the theme park. Auctions are not this whole, let's run to auction houses and we're going to get ourselves a deal. You've really got to check your stuff out. You've got to be ever so careful. If there's anybody new here, I'd probably advise not doing auctions to begin with, because they can be extremely difficult and you can lose a lot of money very quickly if you're not careful. So make sure that you get lots and lots of advice and help from people like Bushra. And Bushra, do you ever, we were talking about earlier on, would you ever consider running a workshop at all to go into the nitty gritty? Maybe look at some.
Funny you mention that. I am considering it. I don't know what kind of interest there is in auctions, but it's something that we can ask the viewers here if they are keen.
Let's put a Y in the chat if you're interested. And what we'll do is, Bushra, I don't know if you feel like it, but once lockdown's all done and dusted, we ran a permitted development workshop here with Colin Smith before. We had 10 people on that. I don't know if you'd want to come and do it here at the office, or we do it online or whatever. If people are interested, I think what would work really well is maybe some case studies of previous auctions and maybe some live event stuff.
I don't know if anybody's a mentee of Ranjan Bhattacharya. So about, 4 months ago, I did a long presentation for all his mentees on commercial auctions, and that was quite useful. So I could do something similar, and depending on what the audience wants as well, tailor it accordingly.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
We've got quite a few yeses. If we go with, if anybody, I'm just trying to think what the best way of doing this is. Can you please put in an email address? Sorry, if you said why, put in an email address and then I can contact everybody. That's probably the easiest way. Or if you don't want to do that, join the Reading Property Meet WhatsApp group. That link, rpmw.co.uk. Bushra's in there as well. And then send me a direct message. Just don't want to lose anybody.
Okay, we've got a little message from Kate here. Kate Day, husband is on another Zoom with Ranjan as we speak, learning about auctions. Thanks, Kate. Okay, so we've got a few emails coming in now. They're fantastic. Some from Bushra. What do you do? What do you or other solicitors usually charge to check auction pack, particularly if one assumes you may need tens of packs to be checked before you are ready to bid? Hopefully you understood that.
So that can vary. So depending on, what I always do is, depending on the auction legal pack, if it's a resi, is it commercial, is it tenanted, is it leasehold, freehold? So it will vary. What I usually say, and obviously if you call me the day before the auction house, just be a bit aware as well, because solicitors do have a life, and if they've got to drop everything and rearrange their whole day to focus on this legal pack, which might take several hours to go through and get through the nitty-gritty, that's going to be reflected as well. So it will vary. So I've done something as cheap as 100 because it was an 80k house, and I think there was not as many documents, and it was a property up north, ranging to hundreds because it was a commercial property. It was, the guide price was 600k, Greater London, and there was a huge overage document and about 20 planning documents to go through. So it's going to be reflective, and everything. What I try and do is, although I've got a set kind of price fees table, I try and do it as bespoke as possible, so it's in your interest as well.
Great, thank you, Bushra.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right, Adam, all yours, matey.
Thank you, mate. So it was just, I think Jane had another question. Consider if you're a buyer at auction, you may need to look at many lots. How best to create a multiple deal?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what do you mean, Jane?
Is it?
So if you're looking to maybe bid at several lots, is that what you mean?
I think so, yeah.
Made to look at many lots. Oh, multiple deal with the solicitor. Okay, so I'm assuming you've got multiple lots. How do you get the solicitor to review all of them, I suppose? Is that what you're saying as a group?
Yeah, so I've done that before.
So.
Yeah, I've managed to do 3 lots for the same auction house for the same client. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose it comes down to the same thing. It's always down to time, isn't it? Time and expertise.
Yeah. So
when you need it by.
I think that certain client, he wanted me to, I think the auction was a day or 2 days afterwards. I said, I can't do 5, but pick your best 3 and I'll do 3.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. And you're in the WhatsApp group anyway. So if there's anybody who is going to go to auction, they can contact you through there as well as all your Instagram and LinkedIn tags.
They can. What I usually, first thing is people say, how much and can you do it? What I say is send me the details of the auction house and the lot number. I usually, within a few hours, I can quickly log onto EIG or the auction house website, check the legal pack and what the situation is currently. And then I'll give you some kind of time frame if I can A, do it in the first place because of capacity, B, and then I'll give you some sort of fee range depending on, because it might be that the legal pack is fine now and I'll give you a quote, but tomorrow morning they've added 10 more documents. So you just got to bear that in mind as well.
Okay, thank you, Bushra. We have got a question from Ramesh. Oh, it's just popped down. Let me just find it for you. Okay, here we go. I think I know the answer to this one, but are more and more vendors moving to auction houses rather than estate agents nowadays?
That's a good question, because it varies how quickly you want your money, I guess, isn't it? And I think with the new stamp duty incentive going on, and if you're looking to diversify your portfolio, if you're looking to get your capital quickly, and I've noticed actually a lot of, usually people will assume, oh, it's all the shabby, horrible stuff that goes onto auctions. Not at all. You can find some really nice stuff at the auctions. And it's just generally vendors want to get rid of it quickly, and they like that speed and the certainty of it as well. And that's one of the reasons why I really like auctions, because I know that, okay, all I have to do is get everything in row, read that pack, and I know within 28 days or more, I'll have that property. I can quickly line up my contractors and it won't drag on for 3 months or 4 months. You've got that certainty and you've got that speed.
Yeah, you have. We've got a couple of questions from Yogesh here. I'll just ask both of them. Do you give written reports to auction packs?
So say that again, Ben.
Do you give written reports for auction packs?
Yes.
Fantastic.
So the way I do it, is I give written reports just as you would receive it from your solicitor if you were going through the normal conveyancing route. So it's quite in-depth and detailed, but for certain clients who are happy just to have it over the phone and they don't really want the faff of reading a report, he's quite happy for me to talk through it, highlight the main points, and he was quite happy for me to do it on the phone, because it was not just 2, he wanted 3 lots, and it was a 45-minute call, and that's how he wanted to just process it. People process things differently. They don't want to read 3-4 pages, which is the average length of a report. They'd rather just have a conversation, have a 2-way conversation, say, okay, what was that? What did that clause mean? What do you think on this? Is that risky? Yes, it is. What would I do in that scenario?
Thank you. Again, from Yogesh, can you prepare auction packs if I am selling in an auction?
Yes.
Okay. How much is it to sell a house through an auction versus through estate agents, says Ria?
That would depend, because the auction houses vary. So depending on which auction house you go to, they might charge you a fee. So I'm not sure what the fees are for the auction houses to obviously put your lot in, but to prepare your legal pack, that's something that your solicitor will tell you. And obviously you've got to make sure you're aware that you're not only just preparing the legal pack, is all the searches that you have to put in, your contract, the special conditions, and anything else that the auction house has asked you, or your solicitor, to put in that legal pack. So obviously that's something that you've got to just find out, really, I think.
Fantastic. We've got one last question here at the moment from Jane Skinner. Do you know much about online auction, the main difference, i.e. eBay for auctions, as I understand, says Jane?
Yeah, so there's two different methods currently. So the auctions there's one that's the modern method, where even though you might win it, you've got 56 days almost to sort out your finances, and you're not committed actually in that scenario. You're not, the hammer as such hasn't fallen as exchange, so you've got a bit more time. The other way, it's just the formats are different for different auctions, I've noticed. So some are the eBay style, and some are, the full like as if you were in the hall, the room with the auctioneer and talking away. So definitely, if I was anybody, if you are looking to buy auction, just sign yourself up for some of the auction houses and just see how it's done. So some of the auction houses, they like the eBay style. You just click, literally just don't get too trigger happy clicking the tab, you bid on it. And then the other one is the auctioneer will be there, you can see him live, and he's bidding and he's calling out. You can see him on your laptop screen, and people are bidding that way as well. It's live, it's happening straight away. And the other way, the eBay style, is where you're clicking and you've still got several hours, if not more, until that auction ends.
Yeah, I've never bought from an auction, Bushra, but I've been to several auctions actually in person. And again, I just quote Susanna Cole, a mentor of mine previously. She would say, before you go and buy an auction, go to the auctions themselves and find out what the best place to stand is, how they operate, etc., etc. And that's probably the same thing for online auctions as well.
Yeah, obviously it doesn't matter where you stand now, you're all on the laptop.
Yeah, exactly. Just go and observe.
Yes, 100%. And just maybe give it a go, just choose a lot that you like the look of, and download the legal pack, read it, see if you can understand the terminology, and see if you can get into that mindset of, I am, Columbo. What do you think? Not who the murderer is, that's a bit morbid, but who do you think, or what do you think is missing in that legal pack? What do you think I would need if I was to convert this into 2 flats, or it's already 2 flats? Do I have planning permission? Is all the documents in there that show that it's a HMO? Just think as if you were, wanting to buy it, and do it the way you want it, and make sure you've got all the documents that will satisfy the needs that you would, as if you were already going to bid on it.
Fantastic, thank you. That's good advice there. We've got some information from Adam. He says, to everyone, any new investors on the call, we have a 55 lesson course for £49. If you don't get value from it, get in touch and we will give you 100% refund. Thanks, Adam. And I think there's a link there. That's at 8:39. We have a question from Mahela. Hopefully I've said your name right, Mahela. I do apologize if I got it wrong. Do you assist the buyer? We've got lots of questions tonight, Bushra. Do you assist the buyer in getting the missing documents, or do the searches?
Good question. So in that scenario, it depends how much time we've got, because searches, there's no way you'd have time to get all those searches back before the auction. Missing documents, rarely, to be honest with you. In that scenario, it's been my clients phoning up to ask more information. Searches, you won't have enough time. Usually by the time they've called me, the auction is that same week. So you'd have to just find out in your own due diligence whether you can get that information yourself from the websites, and maybe knock on doors nearby to see if the neighbors can give you some info on that, anything that you need as well. No, so in that scenario, not really.